Good morning. Today we're observing Trinity Sunday. The Sunday after Pentecost is always Trinity Sunday because it is the time when we recognize that we experience God as Creator, as Redeemer, and as Spirit. And I want to show you this optical illusion, which I think that is probably familiar to you. I think, I don't even know how old it is, but many of us have seen this for several times. I think it's just going to come up now.
Okay.
There you go. See, I love this as an illustration of the Trinity because it makes you have to really pay attention. There's three persons in this picture. There's a young woman, an old woman, and an old man wearing a beret with a big mustache. Now, there's lots of other images that people have used for the Trinity. We talk about water having the form of liquid or vapor or ice, and we talk about the tree with the roots, the trunk, and the branches. We even sometimes talk about three candles in a room, all of them contributing to one light. But I like to use this optical illusion for two reasons. One is that it reminds us that we need to, if we're going to conceive of God, to engage with God, to have faith, means careful looking. It means active engagement. Having faith doesn't simply mean accepting what we've been taught. We always have to look carefully, and it requires a kind of vigilance and alertness that we sometimes forget about. The second reason I like this illustration of the Trinity, because it reminds us that God is present, or we can approach God in different ways depending on where we are and why we're looking. Sometimes the old woman leaps out. Sometimes the young woman leaps out. Sometimes the old man is more dominant. It has nothing to do with the picture, the nature of the picture, nor does our understanding of God have anything to do with God's self. It really has to do with how we, in a particular time and in a particular place, at a particular stage in our life, imagine God. And even though we often think of the Trinity, which is a uniquely Christian concept of God, as a doctrine that we are supposed to believe in, I really like the idea of the doctrine of the Trinity because it frees us up. It reminds us that we can have different images of God. There's no one way to talk about God. What's important is that there are consequences for the way that we talk about God. We talk about God as a judge. It's very different from talking about God as love. They're not mutually exclusive, but the language that we use has consequences for the way we live our lives. So when we often in our faith journey, the words just don't fit anymore, the words that we've been using don't fit anymore, then it's time to rethink our images and to realize that this wordlessness, this stuttering, this stumbling is actually a sign of growth. It's a sign that we're growing into a new understanding of ourselves and of God. I like the way Debbie Thomas has put it. She says, the truth of God will always exceed us. The truth of God will always exceed us. And we might think that there are a lot more important things to be thinking about at this time than the Trinity. But I want to propose that the Trinity, the concept of the Trinity, both frees us to hear different languages of God as valid, to understand the consequences of the language that we use, and to remember that to approach the whole idea of God and truths that we hold dear with humility. Whatever we say about God will be relative, and whatever we say about the qualities or the direction of God will always come short of what God really is. And that humility in holding a faith that is the core of our lives is a very valuable quality to have at this time in our culture and as we watch what's going around us. We are convinced of the truth of what we believe. It is right to have conviction. But with that conviction, the idea of the Trinity reminds us is a humility that no one person can know it all. And that it's okay to stutter and stumble as we try to find words for the deepest and most important truths in our lives. I love what Debbie Thomas says about this. Why should we care about the three in one? We should care because we are children of the Trinity at a time when the world is reeling and desperate. We are children of a mysterious, fluid, diverse, communal, hospitable, and loving God who wants to guide us into the whole truth of who God is and who we are. We should care because the mystery of the Trinity has the power to transform our hearts, leading us toward coherence and dynamism, unity and diversity, hospitality and self-giving love. This week and always, may our lives reflect the transformative beauty of the triune God. May it free our hearts and minds to new images, to new words with which to address and describe the God in whom we move and have our being. At the end of the gospel assigned for today, Jesus says to his disciples, "Remember, I am with you always to the end of the age." He reminds them and us that we share the same breath, the same wind from God, and our bodies are made with the same atomic particles of heat and light from which the universe took shape 13.8 billion years ago. This is the truth expressed in the doctrine of the Trinity. If we are created in the image of a triune God, we are created to live together, not to be solitary or self-sufficient. If we are created in the image of a triune God, who is the origin of all life, who is fully present in history, who empowers and guides us from within our deepest being, then our natural inclination is to engage in the issues of the day. Our natural inclination is to challenge injustice, to stand with the disenfranchised. Our natural inclination is to listen and to hear the truth that is spoken in words that are very different from words that we ourselves would choose. When we proclaim that we are created in the image of a triune God, we proclaim that we are fully alive only when we are in relationships that sometimes draw us together and sometimes draw us apart. We are not alone. My favorite example of this is the story told by, I don't know who told this story, someone sent it to me a long time ago, about a man who was driving and saw two horses in a field. From a distance, each horse looked like any other horse. But when he stopped his car, he noticed that something was quite amazing. Looking in the eyes of one horse, he saw he was blind. And if he stood by and listened, he could hear the sound of a tinkling bell. Looking around, he could see that it came from a smaller horse in the field. Attached to that horse's halter was a small bell, and it let the blind horse know where his friend was, so that he could always know where he was. The horse with the bell was always checking on the blind horse, and the blind horse was always listening for the bell and then slowly walking to where the other horse was, trusting that he would not be led astray. When the horse with the bell returned to the barn, it stopped occasionally and looked back, making sure that his blind friend could hear the bell. In this image, sometimes we are the blind horse, being guided by the little ringing bell of the people whom God has put in our lives. Other times, we are the guide horse, helping someone else to find their way. So when those days when we feel jostled and nudged, it may be that our companion is lost, and it may be that we ourselves have wandered, and we really need that bell to find our way. In the natural order of things, we come together and we go apart. We who are many are one body, inhaling and sharing the same breath of God from which the first light came, and putting into motion the same physical particles that became visible when the universe first expanded, coming together and going apart in the love and grace and communion of God. Being fully alive means looking carefully and trusting at what we see, even if we see three things at the same time. The Trinity reminds us and encourages us to believe that we can do this, that we can be free to imagine new forms of God, to be free to know that we can come to God in any time and in any place, that there is no wrong way to imagine the God in whom we move and have our being. For the breath of God animates us. The work of Christ continues with us, and the spirit of divine love always draws us together, even when it sends us apart. I want to share with you a poem by a man named Ken Stork. It's called The Holy Trinity. It is Holy Trinity Sunday, time to dust off the dogmatics. Speak of God as H2O, water with three parts, mist, liquid, and ice. Or a three-leaf clover will do to disclose the three in one. Why do we bother with images, icons, projections of God worthy to be shattered by the mystery unsolved? How dare we define the divine, domesticate the Godhead? Go ahead, draw your pictures, color your triangles, speak of the three in one and the one in three, but all the while do not trust the limit of language, the confinement of metaphor, the simplicity of simile. The ancients knew that no one could be in the presence of the living God and live. Moses beholds God's backside, Jeremiah, God's fingers in his mouth, Isaiah, God's robe and a hot coal. The Christ confined in flesh, spirit unmanageable, cosmic creator. Expand, do not contract God, for God is the great iconoclast. And we at last, with Job, stand in the divine presence, jaws dropping in muted wonder. Amen.